We're joined now by Mukesh Kapila from Geneva. He's an emeritus professor of global health and also humanitarian affairs at the University of Manchester. And he's also the former director for emergency response at the World Health Organization. Welcome once again. Always great to have you on the program. Now, who do you think and how can we make Russia open those closed ports in Ukraine?
Well, it doesn't look as if Russia is going to actually do that. It'll be a question of land logistics. For example, exporting food to Romania by trucks and train. Obviously, that is easier said than done. So I think this is a very difficult challenge. And the problem isn't being helped by other countries not cooperating. India and Indonesia, for example, have banned exporting food as well. And all that compounds the problem that emanates from the Ukraine war.
So you say it's a question of land logistics. So do you think those ports will remain closed and that wheat that is sitting there, as David Beasley from the World Food Programme describes, will just remain there?
Well, unless, as he said, David Beasley said, unless Russia listens to the pleas that the war, Russia's war on Ukraine is actually having huge collateral damage for the rest of the world. And unless Russia has a quarrel with the rest of the world, then why is it holding the rest of the world hostage to that? So in that sense, Russia is not winning itself any friends by actually starving poor countries around the world. So in that sense, it doesn't make any geopolitical sense at all for Russia. Now, whether that argument gets through to Moscow, of course, is anybody's guess. And
it appears, Mukesh, that just to quote the German foreign minister, that this is a silent weapon that Russia is using. We've sort of focused on what has been more visible, obviously, in Ukraine. But how much of an awareness is there, would you say, of what could happen if these ports don't open, if the land logistics don't move and get this food out?
I think the projections are genuinely catastrophic. And I don't use that word very often in a world full of many crises. But the fact is that the Ukraine problem, alongside what we know was already deteriorating food security situation because of conflicts elsewhere, as well as climate change, and which brings us not just global warming, but also massive disasters like floods and cyclones, which also affect the food production. Now, a combination of all those factors mean that the next year or two is going to be pretty awful. And I can't remember a time in recent decades where there has been this perfect whammy of all the different factors coming together and having a global effect. Normally, what happened in the past is you had a problem in one part of the world, and then other parts of the world could come and help. But this is a genuinely globalized problem with multiple risk factors coming together, conflict, climate change coming together. And quite honestly, other conflicts also have an impact on what happens, for example, in Africa.
And it's not just, is it, the people who are in poorer countries that will be affected. The rest of the world really should take notice. Would you agree?
Well, the food security problem is affecting everyone in the world. Now, and of course, inflation has risen everywhere, partly on the back of the money printing that went on in relation to the COVID pandemic. And I think Western countries as well, or the richer countries, also need to do much more in terms of cushioning the shock on people in those countries. Because if you don't do that, then the solidarity that is essential between rich and poor countries and rich and poor people is going to be lost. So in that sense, I think everyone is in the same boat, though obviously people in poor countries are much worse affected because they are less resilient. They've got less safety net to pick up the pieces. So in that sense, I think it's going to require unprecedented cooperation across nations. And that's why I think the UN is quite right in trying to ask for some kind of global plan to address this rather than piecemeal approaches, which is what we're seeing at the moment.
Good point you make there, in a global approach, not piecemeal. Thank you so much. Mukesh Kapila, live there from Geneva. Appreciate your time, as always. Thank you. Pleasure.